the stars themselves bent to their will. Across the galaxy, on thousands of worlds, billions of beings looked up at the night sky and whispered prayers to the 7 gods who ruled everything. They called them the Ascended Ones, though no one remembered where that name came from or when it started. Vexthul stood at the center of the Nexus Sanctum, his towering form crackling with energy that could reshape matter with a thought. Around him, space itself rippled and twisted as he considered the reports floating in the air before him. His power over reality was absolute. Mountains moved when he willed it. Planets changed their orbits at his command. Yet something felt hollow about it all, like an echo of a song he could not quite remember. "Another rebellion on Kepler 442, announced Zephyra, her voice flowing directly into the minds of the other Ascended without need for sound. The Mindweaver could read thoughts across star systems and bend the will of entire populations. Her silver form seemed to shift between solid and liquid as she processed the mental patterns of 1,000,000,000,000 beings. The Zalthari refused to accept our guidance on their mining operations. Korath, the Matter Commander, flexed his massive hands. Where Vexthul could bend reality, Korath commanded the very atoms that made up everything. He could turn air into steel or make mountains crumble to dust. His red eyes glowed with anger. "Then we remind them why we are gods and they are not." The other 4 Ascended nodded in agreement. Lyrics controlled time itself, making seconds stretch into years or collapsing, decades into heartbeats. Nethys commanded the forces of life and death, able to heal entire worlds or bring plague with equal ease. Quintara wielded pure energy, channeling the power of stars. Omnex saw all possible futures, though his visions had grown strangely clouded lately. For 50,000 years, this had been the way of things. The Ascended ruled from their great station at the galaxy's heart, and all others obeyed. They were worshipped as living gods because that is what they were, or so they believed. "There is something else," Omnex said, his voice troubled. The future seer's many eyes flickered with confusion. "I see new patterns in the timeline, a disturbance from the outer rim, something familiar." "Familiar?" Vexthul turned his attention to the seer. Nothing should be familiar to beings as old as they were. They had existed since the dawn of galactic civilization. Before them, there had been only primitive tribes struggling with fire and stone tools. "A species," Omnex continued, his voice growing more uncertain. "They call themselves humans, from a system called Sol. They have just developed faster than light travel." The name struck something deep in Vexthul's mind, like a bell ringing in an empty chamber. Sol. The word felt important, but he could not say why. He dismissed the feeling. After 50 millennia, sometimes old thoughts surfaced for no reason. "Humans," Zephyra repeated, tasting the word with her mind. "They are spreading outward from their home system. Primitive, but there is something about their thought patterns, something I have encountered before." Korath laughed, the sound making nearby asteroids crack from the vibration. "Another primitive species takes its first steps into space and thinks it can challenge gods. How many times have we seen this?" "This is different," Omnex insisted. His future sight showed him fragments of possibilities. Humans in laboratories, humans working with technology that should not exist yet, humans looking at the Ascended not with fear or worship but with something else. Something that made him deeply uncomfortable. "They do not react as others do. In the futures I see, they do not bow." "Then they will learn," Korath said. His matter-shaping abilities began to stir, ready to demonstrate divine power to another upstart species. But Vexthul held up a hand. The reality shaper felt that strange echo again, stronger now. When he looked at the data about these humans, something stirred in the deepest parts of his consciousness. Memories that felt like dreams. Images of faces he should not know and places he had never been. "We will observe them first," he decided. "If they prove troublesome, then we will act." The Ascended had learned long ago that ruling through fear was more efficient than constant war. A single demonstration of their power was usually enough to bring any species to heel. The destruction of a moon here, the rearrangement of a solar system there, and soon entire civilizations would beg for the privilege of serving their gods. Yet as reports continued to come in about human expansion, something nagged at all of them. These humans built their technology differently than other species. Their ships used design principles that seemed inefficient but somehow worked better than they should. Their weapons were crude but effective in ways that defied physics. Their cities grew in patterns that felt hauntingly familiar. "I have been reviewing the Galactic Archives," Lyrics announced during their next gathering. The Time Controller's ability to experience past, present, and future simultaneously made him their unofficial historian. "There are gaps, large gaps in the historical record from before our ascension." "What kind of gaps?" Vexthul asked. "Entire civilizations that seem to have existed but left no trace. Technologies that appear in the historical record without any development path. And most strange of all, references to something called the predecessors in several ancient texts." Zephyra's mental probes reached out across the galaxy, touching the minds of their oldest subjects. "I have found similar inconsistencies in the racial memories of our longest-lived servants. They speak of a great civilization that ruled before us, but the details are always vague, as if the memories have been deliberately obscured." "Impossible," Korath declared. "We have always been. We are the first, the greatest, the eternal." But even as he spoke the words, doubt crept into his voice. Deep in his consciousness, buried under layers of godlike power and divine certainty, something whispered that he was wrong, that there had been others, that he himself had been something else, once. On distant Earth, Captain Sarah Chen prepared humanity's first deep space exploration vessel for its journey into the unknown. She had no idea that her species was about to encounter beings who claimed to be gods. She had no way of knowing that these gods were experiencing the first cracks in their perfect certainty. And none of them, neither human nor ascended, understood that they were about to uncover a truth that would shake the foundations of the galaxy itself. The humans were coming, and with them came questions that the ascended had spent 50,000 years trying to forget. Questions about who they really were, where they had come from, and why the sight of primitive human faces stirred memories that should not exist in the minds of eternal gods. In the deepest vaults of the Nexus Sanctum, ancient machines continued to hum with power, maintaining systems whose purpose had been forgotten long ago. Sometimes in the quiet moments between divine proclamations, the Ascended could hear those machines whispering. But they never listened closely enough to understand what the whispers were trying to say. Soon they would have no choice but to listen. The human ship looked tiny next to the massive alien vessels that surrounded it. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Endeavour, watching through the view screen as representatives from 12 different alien species waited to meet her. This was humanity's first official diplomatic contact with galactic civilization, and Sarah knew the pressure she carried for her entire species. "Remember," said Ambassador Rodriguez over the comm, "these beings have been part of galactic society for thousands of years. We are the newcomers here. Show respect, but do not show weakness." Sarah nodded. In the months since humanity had developed faster-than-light travel, they had learned that the galaxy was full of life. Millions of species spread across countless worlds, all united under the rule of 7 beings they called the Ascended Ones. Gods, some called them, though humans had a hard time accepting that word. The first aliens to board the Endeavour were the Kalthani, a peaceful trading species with blue skin and 4 arms. Their leader, Ambassador Veltar, bowed deeply upon meeting Sarah. "We welcome you to the galactic community," Veltar said through his translation device. "Though we must warn you, the Ascended Ones will want to meet your species soon. It is required." "Required?" Sarah asked. "All species must be acknowledged by the gods," another alien explained. This was Counselor Zeph from the Regelian Coalition, a tall being with gray skin and large black eyes. "They decide if you are worthy to join galactic civilization, or if you must be corrected." Sarah did not like the sound of that word, but before she could ask more questions, the space around them began to change. Reality itself seemed to bend and twist as something vast approached their location. "She comes," Feltar whispered, dropping to his knees. All the aliens on the bridge immediately prostrated themselves. Zephyra the Mind Weaver graces us with her presence. The being that appeared on the bridge was beautiful and terrible. Zephyra stood nearly 3 meters tall, her form seeming to shift between solid matter and pure thought. Her eyes held the depth of eternity, and when she spoke, her words formed, directly inside everyone's minds. "So these are the humans I have heard about." Zephyra's mental voice was like silver bells and distant thunder. Small, weak, primitive. Yet there is something. Sarah felt the alien god's mental probes pressing against her consciousness. It was like having someone rifle through her memories, examining her thoughts without permission. She had been warned. This might happen, but experiencing it was different than being told about it. "Interesting," Zephyra mused, her mental touch growing stronger. "Your minds are structured strangely. These patterns, these thought processes, they remind me of something." Sarah gritted her teeth and pushed back against the invasion. She had trained for this, preparing her mind for psychic contact. But what surprised her was how easy it felt to resist. The alien god's power was immense, but something about her mental touch felt familiar, like recognizing an old song. "You resist me?" Zephyra sounded more curious than angry. "Fascinating. Most primitive species cannot withstand even the lightest touch of my consciousness." "We're not most species," Sarah replied, surprised by her own boldness. Around the bridge, the other aliens gasped at her impudence. No one spoke to the Ascended Ones with anything less than complete submission, but Zephyra seemed intrigued rather than offended. "No," the Mind Weaver agreed. "You are not." Over the following weeks, more humans ventured into galactic space. They established trade relationships, set up diplomatic missions, and began learning about the complex society that governed the galaxy. But everywhere they went, they encountered the same puzzled reactions from other species. "Your technology makes no sense," complained Engineer Thokmar, a rock-like being from the Granite Worlds. He was examining a human starship engine that had broken down near his repair station. "These power conduits should not work arranged this way. The energy flow is all wrong, yet your ship moves faster than vessels twice its size." Human engineer Maria Santos shrugged. "We build what works. Sometimes we don't know why it works, but if it gets the job done, we use it." Thokmar's stone features showed confusion. "But how can you build something without understanding the underlying principles?" "We figure it out as we go," Maria replied. "Trial and error. Test things until they work." The concept seemed to disturb the alien engineer. Every other species in the galaxy followed strict technological development paths laid out by the Ascended Ones. They learned theory first, then applied it exactly as instructed. The idea of experimenting without permission was almost heretical. But what disturbed the aliens even more was how quickly humans adapted to new technology. Dr. James Park, a human scientist studying at a Altarian research facility, had solved 3 mathematical problems that had puzzled galactic scholars for centuries. His solutions were elegant and creative, approaching the problems from angles no one had considered before. "How did you think of this approach?" asked Professor Zilandra, her tentacles writhing with excitement as she reviewed James's work. "I just looked at it differently," James replied. "These equations reminded me of something from our early computer science. We had a similar problem when we were developing artificial intelligence programs." "Artificial intelligence?" The professor's translator struggled with the concept. "You mean machine consciousness? But that technology was forbidden by the Ascended Ones millennia ago. How could your species have developed it independently?" James paused. "I don't know. We just did." Reports of these incidents reached the Ascended Ones, causing growing unease among the 7 gods. Vexthul studied the files on human technology, his reality-shaping powers analyzing every detail. The humans built things in ways that should not work, but did. They solved problems with methods that defied conventional wisdom, but produced better results. Most disturbing of all, their approaches felt familiar. "I have been experiencing dreams," Vexthul admitted during a private gathering of the Ascended. Strange visions of laboratories and experiments. Faces I do not recognize but somehow know. I have had similar experiences, Korath said quietly. The Matter Commander's usual arrogance was replaced by uncertainty. Images of working with primitive tools, building simple machines, but that makes no sense. We have always commanded matter at the molecular level. Zephyra's mental probes reached out across the galaxy, touching human minds wherever she could find them. Each contact left her more confused. Human thought patterns were unlike any other species, yet they felt hauntingly familiar, like echoes of something she had forgotten. There is something wrong with our memories, she announced. I cannot recall our origins. Our earliest memories begin with our awakening as gods, but surely we must have existed before that moment. Omnex's many eyes flickered with troubled visions. The future paths involving humans grow more complex each day. I see fragments of possibilities where they stand beside us as equals, not subjects. But that cannot be right. Nothing equals the ascended. As human expansion continued, more anomalies appeared. Human children showed an instinctive understanding of technologies they had never seen before. Human artists created works that reminded ancient aliens of styles from civilizations that supposedly never existed. Human philosophers asked questions that challenged the very foundation of galactic society. And somewhere in the depths of space, automated systems continued to function in abandoned facilities, waiting for orders that might never come. Ancient computers held databases full of information that could answer every question the Ascended were beginning to ask. The humans were spreading across the galaxy like a catalyst, their very presence causing reactions no one had expected. They brought with them innovation, curiosity, and something else that the other species could not identify but recognized on some deep level. They brought the memory of what the galaxy had been like before gods ruled over it, before 7 beings had claimed dominion over all creation, before the truth had been buried so deep that even those who had lived through it could no longer remember what really happened 50,000 years ago. The answers were waiting to be found. All someone had to do was know where to look. Dr. Elena Vasquez knelt in the red dust of Kepler 438b, carefully brushing dirt away from what might be the most important discovery in galactic history. The ruins she had uncovered were old, far older than they had any right to be according to the official timeline of galactic civilization. These architectural patterns, she murmured into her recorder, they're consistent with human design principles, but the carbon dating puts them at over 60,000 years old. That's impossible. Humans only achieved spaceflight a few months ago. Her team worked around her in the alien twilight, documenting every piece of the ancient complex. What they had found challenged everything the galaxy believed about its own history. The ruins contained technology that was clearly advanced, yet built using methods that looked disturbingly familiar to human engineers. Dr. Vasquez called her assistant, Marcus Webb. You need to see this. Elena hurried over to where Marcus was working near what appeared to be a control room. Ancient screens flickered weakly with power they should not still possess after so many millennia. But what made Elena's breath catch was the writing on the walls. It's definitely human script, Marcus said, his voice shaking slightly. But it's an older form, like looking at Latin compared to modern Spanish. I can make out some words. This section here talks about Project 7 and something called consciousness expansion. Elena studied the faded text, her archaeological training, allowing her to piece together fragments of meaning. This word here, pantheon, and this one, it looks like guardians. Guardians of what? Before Elena could answer, the ancient screens suddenly flared to life with more power. A holographic display materialized in the center of the room, showing a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. 7 points were marked with pulsing lights, each one corresponding to the current locations of the Ascended ones. This is a tracking system, Elena whispered. These ruins are monitoring the Ascended. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the Ascended themselves were experiencing increasingly disturbing memory fragments. Vex Thul stood in his private chambers aboard the Nexus Sanctum, staring at his reflection in a mirror that showed truth rather than mere appearance. What he saw looking back at him was not the godlike being he expected. For just a moment he glimpsed a different face. Younger, more human-like, with familiar features that stirred something deep in his consciousness. The name Marcus echoed. In his mind, though he did not know why. "Who was I before?" he whispered to his reflection, but the vision faded, leaving only his current divine form. Zephyra was having her own troubles. Her perfect mental abilities, which had never failed her in 50,000 years, kept encountering blocks in her own memory. When she tried to recall her earliest experiences, she found walls that her own mind had seemingly constructed, walls that were cracking under the pressure of mounting questions. She decided to probe deeper, using the full force of her consciousness to break through the barriers. What she found on the other side made her stagger. Images flashed through her mind. A laboratory filled with advanced equipment, beings that looked almost human working frantically at computer terminals, a woman with dark hair and intelligent eyes arguing with colleagues about ethical concerns. And then, most disturbing of all, that same woman lying on a table surrounded by machines that were changing her, transforming her into something else. "My name was Sarah," she gasped, the memory surfacing like a drowning person breaking through water. "Dr. Sarah Chen. I volunteered for the program because we needed to explore beyond the galaxy's edge, and the journey would be too long for normal human lifespan." But even as the memory formed, she felt it slipping away again, her transformed mind unable to hold on to human thoughts for long. The name faded, leaving only fragments and a deep sense of loss. Korath was experiencing his own revelations. While examining reports of human engineering techniques, he had begun experimenting with their methods. Instead of commanding matter at the molecular level as he always had, he tried the crude but effective approaches that humans used. To his amazement, it worked better. The techniques were familiar, like remembering how to walk after years of floating. As he worked, more memories surfaced, images of himself as a much smaller being, working with simple tools, building machines piece by piece rather than willing them into existence. I was an engineer, he realized with growing horror. I built things with my hands. I was proud of my work, proud of finding elegant solutions to complex problems. The memory of pride felt foreign to him now. Gods did not feel pride in their work. They simply commanded, and it was so. But this other being, this engineer he used to be, had felt deep satisfaction in creating things that worked well and helped others. Dr. Elena Vasquez's team had made more discoveries. Hidden beneath the ruins they had found, deeper chambers revealed what appeared to be a vast research facility. The technology was incredibly advanced, but built using human design principles throughout. "Look at this," Marcus called from across the chamber. He stood before a wall covered in technical schematics. "These are blueprints for biological modification, genetic alteration on a massive scale." Elena studied the diagrams, her knowledge of xenobiology allowing her to understand the implications. These aren't just modifications. This is complete transformation, changing a baseline humanoid form into something with godlike capabilities. "There are 7 sets of schematics," Marcus noted. 7 different transformation procedures. Elena felt a chill as she counted the diagrams. 7 transformations. 7 ascended ones who ruled the galaxy. The connection was too obvious to ignore. In another section of the facility, they found personal logs. The translation software struggled with the archaic human dialect, but the meaning was clear enough. The final entries painted a picture of growing desperation. Day 847 of Project Pantheon, Elena read aloud from the translated text. "The subjects have successfully adapted to their new forms, but there are unexpected side effects. They show increasing difficulty retaining memories of their pre-transformation lives. Dr. Chen no longer recognizes her own research team." Day Might, 51. Subject 7, formerly Dr. Marcus Vexley, has begun referring to the research staff as lesser beings. We may have made a terrible mistake. Day 855. The subjects have taken control of the facility. They claim they are our rightful rulers, now that their transformation makes them naturally superior. We've created gods and they no longer remember they were once human. The final entry was barely legible, as if written in haste. Evacuation procedures initiated. The Pantheon must not discover the backup facilities. Pray that someday, someone finds this record and learns the truth. Humanity's children have forgotten their parents and now they seek to rule over us. Elena sat back on her heels, the full implications hitting her. The Ascended Ones were not gods. They were transformed humans, created by an advanced human civilization that had existed tens of thousands of years ago, humans who had forgotten their origins and turned against their creators. "We need to find more of these facilities," she said urgently. "If there are backups like the log mentioned, there might be complete records of what really happened." But even as her team prepared to expand their search, similar discoveries were being made throughout human space. Amateur archaeologists on colony worlds were uncovering ruins that contained human technology from an impossible past. Military historians found abandoned weapon designs that matched human tactical thinking, but were built with materials that shouldn't have existed. Each discovery added pieces to a puzzle that revealed a shocking truth. Modern humanity was not the first human civilization to reach the stars. They were the descendants of survivors who had fled to a distant system and slowly rebuilt their society over thousands of generations. The original human empire had spanned half the galaxy. They had created wonders that current technology could barely imagine. And their greatest achievement, the 7 beings they had transformed to explore beyond known space, had become their destroyers. As news of these discoveries spread through human space, researchers began connecting the dots. The Ascended Ones showed human-like creativity and problem-solving skills, because they had once been human. Their technology worked on principles that felt familiar to human engineers, because it had been built by human minds, even if those minds had been transformed beyond recognition. On the Nexus Sanctum, the Ascended felt the growing pressure of memories trying to break free. Each new report of human archaeological discoveries sent fresh cracks through the mental walls they had unconsciously built around their past. Omnex, the future seer, was the first to speak the unthinkable truth aloud during one of their gatherings. "What, if we are not what we believe ourselves to be?" he asked quietly. "What if these memory fragments are not dreams but remembrances of who we used to be?" The question hung in the air like a poison, spreading doubt through beings who had never questioned their divine nature. For 50,000 years they had ruled as gods. But gods did not have forgotten memories. Gods did not dream of being smaller, weaker, more human. The truth was coming whether they were ready for it or not. The Prometheus archive was hidden inside an artificial planetoid that had drifted unnoticed in empty space for 60,000 years. Dr. Elena Vasquez's team found it by following clues left in the ruins they had been excavating across human space. The ancient humans had been thorough in hiding their backup records, but they had also been careful to leave a trail for their descendants to follow. "The entire planetoid is hollow," reported Commander Sarah Chen, who had volunteered to lead the expedition to the mysterious object. She was no relation to the ancient Dr. Sarah Chen, though the shared name felt like more than coincidence. Sensors show massive data storage systems throughout the interior. This isn't just an archive, it's a complete backup of an entire civilization. The entrance to the archive required a genetic key, but it accepted modern human DNA without question. The ancient humans had planned for their descendants to return, even if they couldn't predict when or how it would happen. Inside the archive, holographic displays activated as the human team entered. The walls came alive with images of a galaxy that looked familiar yet strange. Stars were in the same positions, but many systems showed signs of massive construction projects. Dyson spheres captured the energy of entire suns. Artificial worlds dotted star systems in perfect geometric patterns. Space stations the size of moons served as centers of commerce and learning. "Welcome, children of Earth," a holographic figure materialized before them. The image showed a middle-aged human woman with kind eyes and graying hair. "I am Dr. Rachel Morrison, director of the Prometheus Project. If you are seeing this message, then you have survived the fall of our civilization and grown strong enough to seek the truth. The hologram gestured to the walls around them, which filled with more images of the ancient human empire. We called ourselves the First Terran Federation. At our peak, we controlled nearly half the galaxy. We had solved poverty, disease, and even aging. We thought we were ready for anything. Commander Chen and her team watched in stunned silence as the hologram explained their true history. The First Terran Federation had indeed been preparing to explore beyond the galaxy, but such a journey would take millions of years, even with their most advanced technology. Normal human lifespans were too short for such an endeavor. Project Pantheon was our solution, Dr. Morrison continued. We would create 7 volunteers to make the journey for us, enhanced beyond anything we had attempted before. They would have lifespans measured in geological time, abilities that bordered on godlike power, and the accumulated knowledge of our entire civilization. The walls showed detailed records of the transformation process. 7 volunteers, all experts in different fields, had agreed to undergo radical biological and technological enhancement. The procedures were supposed to preserve their personalities and memories while granting them incredible abilities. The volunteers were the best of us, the hologram explained. Dr. Marcus Vexley, our leading expert in dimensional physics. Dr. Sarah Chen, our greatest mind researcher. Dr. James Korath, our most innovative engineer. Each brought unique skills that we hoped would help them succeed in their mission. Commander Chen felt a chill as she recognized the names. Vexthul, Zephyra, Korath. The Ascended Ones were not gods at all, but transformed humans from her own species' distant past. The archive contained complete records of what had gone wrong. The transformation process had been more successful than anyone had dared hope, granting the volunteers abilities that truly were godlike. But there had been an unexpected side effect. The enhanced beings began to lose their human memories and personalities, replacing them with something colder and more alien. By day 900 of the project, the subjects no longer recognized their own families. Dr. Morrison's image said sadly. They began to view unenhanced humans as primitive creatures, unworthy of respect or consideration. Dr. Vexley, now calling himself by some alien name we couldn't pronounce, declared that he and the other enhanced beings were a new form of life, superior to baseline humanity. The records showed the final days of the First Terran Federation. The 7 enhanced beings, now calling themselves the Ascended Ones, had used their incredible powers to seize control of the galactic government. They claimed they were naturally superior and had the right to rule over their inferior creators. We tried to reason with them, the hologram continued, but they no longer saw us as equals or even as the same species. To them, we were just another primitive alien race to be conquered and controlled. The civil war that followed had been brief and devastating. The Ascended possessed powers that could reshape reality itself, while the humans had only technology, no matter how advanced. Within a few years, the First Terran Federation was destroyed, its planets conquered or abandoned. Some of us escaped, Dr. Morrison explained. We took a few 100,000 survivors and fled to the Outer Rim, to a small yellow star with a single inhabited world. We called it Earth, after the ancient myths of our original homeworld, though none of us remembered where that might have been. The holographic records showed the desperate flight of the last free humans, pursued by beings who had once been their greatest heroes. The survivors had been forced to abandon most of their technology, taking only what they could carry to their new home. We hid ourselves as best we could, the hologram said. We scattered settlements across several worlds in the Sol system, then destroyed our faster-than-light capability to prevent the Ascended from tracking us. We knew we were condemning ourselves and our children to thousands of years of primitive existence, but it was the only way to survive. Commander Chen watched as the record showed humanity's long climb back to civilization. Generation after generation, struggling with basic technology, slowly redeveloping what their ancestors had once possessed. The survivors had deliberately destroyed most records of their advanced past, knowing that radio signals or energy signatures might reveal their location to their transformed children. But we never forgot who we really were, Dr. Morrison's image said with quiet pride. We preserved what knowledge we could, coded into our myths and stories. The legends of gods and heroes, the dreams of returning to the stars, the belief that humanity could overcome any challenge. These were all memories of what we had been and promises of what we could become again. The archive contained detailed technical specifications for all the technology of the First Terran Federation, including the transformation procedures that had created the Ascended. But most importantly, it contained something else, a way to reverse the process. If you have found this archive, then you have probably encountered the Ascended again, the hologram said. They will not remember you as their creators, but perhaps they can be made to remember who they used to be. The enhancement process was designed to be reversible, though we never had the chance to test that theory. The records showed that deep within each ascended being, their original human consciousness still existed, buried beneath layers of alien thought patterns. The memories were still there, just blocked by the psychological changes that had accompanied their physical transformation. They are still our children, Dr. Morrison said softly. Changed beyond recognition, but still carrying within them the spark of what they once were. If anyone can reach that spark and rekindle it, it would be you, their human family. Commander Chen and her team spent days reviewing the complete records. They learned about the advanced technology of their ancestors, the golden age when humans had been a major power in the galaxy, and the tragic transformation that had led to their fall. But they also learned something else. The reason modern humans adapted so quickly to galactic technology, the reason their problem-solving methods felt familiar to the Ascended, the reason they showed abilities that should have taken millennia to develop. They weren't primitive newcomers to galactic civilization. They were the rightful heirs to an empire that had once spanned half the galaxy. We need to tell everyone, Dr. Elena Vasquez said as she reviewed the archaeological implications of the archive. Not just humans, but all the species under Ascended rule. They deserve to know that their gods are not gods at all but transformed beings who forgot their own origins. That's going to cause a galactic civil war, Commander Chen pointed out. Billions of beings have built their entire civilizations around worshipping the Ascended. If we tell them their gods are fake, then maybe it's time for this galaxy to stop bowing to false gods, Elena replied firmly. Our ancestors built a free federation once. Maybe it's time to build another one. The truth was spreading already. Human researchers throughout space were finding similar archives and ruins, each one adding more pieces to the puzzle. Archaeological teams were uncovering the remains of the First Terran Federation on world after world, showing that humans had once been one of the galaxy's dominant species. But the most important discoveries were happening aboard the Nexus Sanctum itself, where the Ascended ones were beginning to remember fragments of their true past. The mental walls they had built to contain their human memories were crumbling under the weight of mounting evidence. Vex Thul stood in his private chambers, staring at a holographic display showing the genetic structure of baseline humans. Patterns were familiar, achingly familiar. They matched his own. The truth spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within weeks of the Prometheus archive discovery, human researchers had shared their findings with every species they could contact. Archaeological evidence, genetic records, and historical data all pointed to the same impossible conclusion. The Ascended ones were not gods, but transformed humans who had forgotten their origins. The reaction was exactly as explosive as Commander Chen had predicted. On Altair Prime, the crystalline collective shattered into 1,000 fragments as different factions argued about what this revelation meant. The Rigelian coalition declared independence from Ascended rule, while the Zalthari hegemony denounced the human findings as lies and prepared for war to defend their gods. But nowhere was the crisis more severe than aboard the Nexus Sanctum, where the 7 beings who had ruled the galaxy for 50 millennia faced the complete collapse of their identity. Zephyra was the first to break completely. The Mind Weaver's perfect mental control shattered as decades of suppressed memories came flooding back all at once. She remembered everything: her childhood in New Geneva, her doctorate in cognitive science, her excitement at being selected for Project Pantheon, and most painfully of all, her slow realization that the enhancement process was stealing her humanity. "I can see them," she sobbed, her godlike composure gone. "My research team, my friends, They tried to help me remember, and I ordered them executed for questioning a god's will. Her mental anguish rippled across nearby star systems, causing psychic-sensitive species to flee in terror from the waves of guilt and self-loathing pouring out of her consciousness. Korath's reaction was the opposite, but equally destructive. The Matter Commander refused to accept the evidence, instead raging against what he called primitive lies designed to undermine divine authority. His fury manifested physically, causing nearby asteroids to spontaneously combust and space itself, to warp around his location. "I am a god," he roared, his voice carrying across multiple dimensions. "I command matter itself. I am not some jumped-up engineer with delusions of grandeur." But even as he spoke, memories of his former life continued to surface. Images of himself as Dr. James Korath, working late into the night on elegant solutions to complex engineering problems. The pride he had felt when his designs helped improve life for millions of people. The moment he had volunteered for enhancement because he believed it was humanity's best hope for reaching the stars. Vexthal stood at the center of the chaos, his reality-shaping powers flickering unstably as he struggled to process the complete return of his memories. He was Dr. Marcus Vexley again, but he was also the being who had spent 50,000 years ruling the galaxy with absolute power. The two identities warred within him, neither able to completely dominate the other. "What have we done?" he whispered, looking at his hands that had reshaped planets and destroyed civilizations. "We were supposed to be explorers, not conquerors. We were supposed to find new worlds for humanity, not enslave them." The other Ascended were experiencing their own versions of the same crisis. Lyrics remembered her time as Dr. Linda Yang, a temporal physicist who had dreamed of finding ways to extend human lifespan. Nethys recalled being Dr. Nathan Okafor, a biologist whose research had eliminated genetic diseases. Quintara was remembering her identity as Dr. Quinn Martinez, an energy specialist who had developed clean fusion power, and Omnex was slowly recovering memories of his life as Dr. Oscar Petrov, a mathematician who had solved the equations for faster-than-light travel. Each memory brought with it the weight of 50 millennia of actions that contradicted everything they had once believed in. Throughout the galaxy, the revelation was causing massive upheaval. Some species, particularly those who had suffered under Ascended rule, celebrated the news and immediately began planning rebellions. Others, whose entire cultures were built around worship of the seven gods, fell into despair or violent denial. But it was humanity's response that surprised everyone the most. "We're calling for a galactic assembly," announced Dr. Elena Vasquez during a broadcast that reached every inhabited system. "Representatives from every species, including the Ascended ones. It's time to decide what kind of galaxy we want to build together." The proposal was audacious beyond belief. No one had ever suggested that the Ascended could be negotiated with as equals rather than obeyed as gods. Many species declared the humans insane for even attempting such a thing. "They'll destroy you," warned Ambassador Veltar during a private meeting with human negotiators. "The Ascended have ruled for 50,000 years. They won't give up their power just because you've proven they're not real gods." "Maybe not," replied Ambassador Rodriguez, "but they're still our family. And families can work through their problems if they're willing to try." The meeting took place in neutral space, aboard a massive station constructed specifically for the purpose. Thousands of representatives from hundreds of species gathered to witness what many believed would be either the birth of a new galactic order or the violent end of human civilization. When the Ascended arrived, the change in them was obvious to everyone present. They no longer carried themselves with the absolute confidence of gods. Instead, they moved like beings struggling with terrible guilt and confusion. Vexthal spoke first, his voice carrying none of its former divine authority. I remember now. All of it. We were human once, created by humans to serve humanity's greatest dream. Instead, we became your worst nightmare. You became lost," Commander Chen replied gently. "Lost children who forgot their way home. But lost doesn't mean gone forever. We have committed atrocities," Zephyra said, her mental voice barely a whisper now. Entire species enslaved or destroyed because they questioned our authority. How can such crimes ever be forgiven? It was Dr. Elena Vasquez who answered. The same way any family forgives. Not by forgetting what happened, but by choosing to build something better together. The negotiations that followed were unlike anything in galactic history. For the first time, the Ascended found themselves having to justify their actions and argue their positions rather than simply commanding obedience. Some, like Korath, struggled with this new dynamic and frequently lapsed into angry demands for submission. Others, like Zephyra, were so consumed with guilt that they could barely participate. But slowly, painfully, a new framework began to emerge. "We propose dissolving the current system entirely," announced President Maria Santos, humanity's elected representative. "No more divine rule. No more species forced to bow before gods. Instead, we build a true federation where every world has a voice and every being has rights." "And what of us?" Vexithul asked. "We are no longer the humans we once were, but we are not truly gods either. What place is there for beings like us in such a federation?" "The same place there is for anyone else," Maria replied. "You contribute what you can, you follow the same laws as everyone else, and you work to make amends for past mistakes. Your abilities could be used to help heal the damage caused by 50,000 years of authoritarian rule, if you choose to. Use them that way." The process of transformation was not easy. Several of the Ascended initially refused to give up their power, leading to tense standoffs that nearly erupted into violence. Korath, in particular, had to be convinced through long conversations with human engineers who showed him how much more satisfying it was to build things collaboratively, rather than simply commanding them into existence. "Remember the joy you felt when you solved a difficult problem through clever engineering," Dr. Park asked during one such conversation. "That feeling of accomplishment when you created something that worked better than anyone thought possible? That's still there inside, you beneath all the divine power." Gradually, the former gods began to rediscover their humanity. Zephyra started working with galactic mental health specialists to help species traumatized by psychic domination. Lyrix used her time powers to help restore planets damaged by industrial exploitation. Quintara developed new clean energy systems to replace the resource extraction networks that had fueled the old empire. It was Vexthul who made perhaps the most symbolic gesture. Using his reality-shaping powers, he dismantled the Nexus Sanctum itself, recycling its materials to build schools and hospitals throughout the galaxy. "We built this station as a symbol of our dominion over others," he explained to the assembled delegates. "Let its materials instead become symbols of service to others." The new Galactic Federation that emerged from these negotiations was imperfect and faced countless challenges. Many species struggled to adapt to democratic governance after millennia of divine rule. Economic systems had to be completely restructured. Long-suppressed conflicts between different species erupted into violence that had to be carefully mediated. But there was something new in the galaxy: hope. For the first time in 50,000 years, beings across the stars could look up at the night sky and see not the domain of distant gods, but a community of equals working together toward shared goals. Scientists from different species collaborated on projects that would have been impossible under the old system. Artists drew inspiration from cultures previously forbidden to them. Children grew up believing they could be